This is Dan McDermott, and you're watching the TV Writers Podcast.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for script writing information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft script writing software, the entertainment industry standard for script writing worldwide. My name's Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, Episode 6 for Monday, November 15th, 2010. This is our first episode in a little while, and I do want to apologize for that because I had a silly wrist injury, but my wrist is feeling a lot better, and so we're going to be rolling new episodes starting now. Today, I'm so excited to bring you an interview that I had with co-executive producer and writer for Human Target on Fox, Dan McDermott. You may remember that a few episodes ago, I had an interview with Matt Miller, who was a showrunner from that show, and so it's so exciting that we get to hear another perspective from Dan. Dan also actually wrote the feature Eagle Eye recently and was the creator of the show Angela's Eyes. So he gives a number of different perspectives about the TV and feature writing process and how you can balance all of them together. I'm sure you're going to love it. Make sure you do check out Human Target on Fox this Wednesday. Check your local listings to find out when and where you can see it. And I'm sure you're going to love it. As Matt did discuss, there's a lot of exciting developments in Season 2. But for now, let's roll with the interview that I had with Dan McDermott. Enjoy. Well, my name is Gray Jones, and I'm here with writer and co-executive producer of Human Target on Fox, Dan McDermott. Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you, Gray?
I'm doing great, and I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Sure.
And this is for Script Magazine, and so we're going to be talking about you as a writer a little bit more than Human Target. We will get to Human Target a little later. But first of all, I want to find out where you grew up, where you went to college, that kind of thing.
Well, I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Rockville, Maryland, and then went to high school in Northern California when my family moved out west. But I went to college at UCLA. Mm-hmm. I did my undergraduate there, where I got a degree in motion pictures and television at the film school, and then I went to AFI in the screenwriting program after that.
Okay, and so I guess it was before college you decided you wanted to be a writer, or did you sort of figure that out in your undergrad?
I decided probably around the time I was 9 or 10 years old.
Wow.
I knew at 9 or 10 years old that I wanted to work in the entertainment business. I sort of figured that out, and then as I got older and explored different disciplines and and the opportunities available and stuff, my plan was always to become a writer. Although I did get sidetracked for a couple years after college, which I can talk about when you're ready.
Mm-hmm. After AFI or between college and AFI?
After AFI, I actually spent 10 years as an executive working on the television and cable movie side of the business, and then segued in 2002 to become a writer full time.
Okay, and so which companies did you work for in that time? I
worked for the Fox network from 1990 to 1995. Mm-hmm. And then I worked for DreamWorks. I started DreamWorks Television in 1995 and worked there for just about 7 years, left at the beginning of 2002.
Oh, okay. Now, your first IMDb credits are Angela's Eyes and also the feature Eagle Eye. Which came first?
Which came first in terms of what I wrote first or what was produced first? Because I wrote Eagle Eye first, but I wrote Eagle Eye and Angela's Eyes around the same time. And then Angela's Eyes went into production pretty quickly, and Eagle Eye took a couple more years.
Oh, okay. And was that your first script, or your first two scripts outside of when you left in 2002?
No, I wrote it. What happened was I wrote a feature script called Selling Time, which I sold to Fox. Mm-hmm. And while I was still an executive, it was sort of the thing I did while I was an executive, and then I left after I sold that script and became a writer full time. I had been running DreamWorks Television, and so when I left, I obviously had a good relationship with Jeffrey and Steven and David and all the feature executives and TV guys and stuff, and so about a year after I left, I got a call from Adam Goodman, who was at that point running development for the movie side of DreamWorks, and he said, Steven has this idea. Are you interested in coming in and hearing about it? And I said, sure. So sat down with Adam first, and talked about the idea, and then came up with an approach which ultimately became Eagle Eye, and went in and pitched Steven and talked to him about it and sold him, on the approach that I had, and then spent about a year and a half writing the script. I did obviously, as anybody, who writes in the movie side knows, I did multiple drafts of the script over about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then they subsequently brought on some other writers, but the movie went into production probably about a year after I left.
Yeah. So how I know this is obviously topic of contention in feature writing, but would you say that your draft made it for the most part to the screen, or are you pretty happy with how the movie turned out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the realities of the writing in the movie side of the business is that's the MO of all the studios. Is on multiple writers, so you have to sort of have a thick skin and just understand that when you're writing mainstream commercial blockbuster movies, that's going to happen. You're either going to be the first guy in the door and then get rewritten, or you may be a later guy in the door or girl in the door and be rewriting somebody else. But yeah, I'm very happy with the movie. I mean, I got sole story credit, so I think that reflects the idea that it is my story, my vision, the movie that I wanted to see, and primary screenwriting credit. So which I shared with some other writers who did a great job, by the way. I mean, the other writers that are credited on the movie made valuable contributions, and were duly and appropriately noted. So
yeah, I love the film, by the way. Great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And now Angela's Eyes is a TV series, and so you're doing that at the same time. How is that working on the feature world and the TV world at the same time?
It was actually great. I mean, I'm someone that enjoys working on multiple projects at once. So for me, I always have at least two or three things going on, and at the time, I'm not sure how much direct overlap there was between Eagle Eye and Angela's Eyes, but there's always overlap between anything I'm doing, So, and I think, it's one of the things that I think certainly as a screenwriter. I mean, in television, it's a little more focused, and there's a little bit more of a sort of regimented and very specific track that things operate on. So, you can have a sense you can sell a pilot in July or August, have to turn it in by Thanksgiving or first part of December, and you'll know by early January whether or not your pilot's getting picked up.
Wow.
So things move quickly. The movie side of it, you can spend years writing on a project. That, I mean, my project Selling Time, which I sold to Fox in at the end of 2001, they're still trying to figure out how to make that movie.
Wow.
9 years later. So. I've spent years. I've probably done 20 or 30 drafts on that script. So I feel like, my advice is always, if you're someone who can, work on multiple projects, you should. Some people don't want to. I mean, certainly when you're doing a show, like I'm doing now with Human Target, which is it's much more time intensive. It's a little bit more difficult to work on other things because, it's a 12-hour day, every day. So it's a little harder.
Yeah. So tell me about, with Angela's Eyes, you created the series and you were also an executive producer. Were you the showrunner of the show?
I was not the show. I mean, no, I was an executive producer. I hired someone to come in and run it full time because at the time I was writing the remake of The Omen that came out in 2006. And so I was busy doing that. It's like, as I said, you never know when these things are going to get ordered. And I had, at the time that Angela's Eyes was ordered, and it went right from script. It got a 13-episode order from Lifetime. And I was writing The Omen and sort of flying back and forth to Prague where we were in production. So I needed someone who could be full-time on Angela's Eyes and get that show up and on its feet. But I was there a lot, but I just wasn't there 100% of the time.
Oh, okay. And now talk about, somewhere around that time, you were commissioned to do a draft of Romancing the Stone?
Yeah. That was about a year and a half ago. I was hired to do Romancing the Stone, yeah.
And what was that like? I love the original film.
I love the original film too, and well, what happened was I got a call from my agent asking if I was interested in the project because it had come up at Fox, and John Davis, who's a producer that I've worked with on a number of stuff of other projects, that they were looking for a writer to come up with a take on a remake for Romancing the Stone. And I, as someone who loved the original film, I said I'd be thrilled to go in and pitch my take on it. And they met with a number of writers. I mean, I think they met with 20, I don't know what the specific number was, but there was a lot of them. And and it was a process. Me getting that job was a process that probably took 3 to 4 months at least. Wow. I mean, I probably had, I would guess, 4 or 5 meetings and 2 or 3 phone calls at least. And my approach was that, as with most remakes, I mean, there's some scenarios where, like, well, I guess, like, for example, The Omen was a very literal remake of the original David Seltzer script. I mean, I didn't even get credit on that movie. And going into it, it was very clear, one of the things that John Moore, who was the director in the studio, and I had all said and agreed to was that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to change this substantially. We just want to update it, which I knew going in and was stated would mean that I wouldn't receive credit, and yet I was thrilled to do it because I love the original movie. Romancing the Stone was a little bit different because it required, I think, a sort of taking the core idea and kind of reinventing it in a way that made it relevant or makes it relevant for today's audiences. Yeah. And so that was the sort of hardest part, because if you look at that movie, the genius of the original, I think it was Diane Thomas script, is that it's a very simple idea that is infused with brilliant characters and brilliant writing. And so, you're engaged the entire time, even though there's not a whole lot of plot, going on. You're so in love with those 2 characters, that it makes it just a great ride. So the challenge, obviously, is how to create a contemporary story in a world where we have cell phones and satellites, and it's a little bit harder for someone to get lost in the same way that Joan Wilder got lost in the original. And yet also to have a contemporary story that would resonate and feel real and fun, and yet also to retain really compelling characters and execute the drama of that experience in a really compelling way.
So it seems like you've done a lot of, I mean, in Angela's Eyes, it was a FBI story, and then Eagle Eye is this Big Brother kind of thing. And is that kind of your interest, these kind of action, adventure, spy kind of things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's as much it comes out of as much my interest in the world as I see it, and we live in today, as anything, where Eagle Eye was very much born out of a specific experience I had that really freaked me out. Okay. And I can tell you about it if you want to hear it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had just gotten right around the time that Adam Goodman had called me and said, "Hey, are you interested in this idea? It's about a computer that becomes sentient and develops its own sort of intelligence and runs amok. Are you interested in the idea?" And I said, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I thought, initially I thought, well, about other similar projects that had, whether it's the movie The Net or other movies like that. And I thought, how do you make this really unique and different? And I had just gotten a new car, and the dealer had said to me, as I was leaving, as I was signing all the papers, he said, "Hey, make sure you register the SOS unit in the car." And I said, okay. And so, I hadn't thought about it. And about a week later, I was driving around, and I thought, I got to register that SOS unit. And it's a little button in the headboard of the car. Like
an OnStar or something?
Yeah, like an OnStar thing. So I pushed the button, and then I heard ringing, and which I thought was very unusual because there was no phone in the car. And a guy comes on the phone and he says, "Hi, Mr. McDermott. This is Maurice from the Mercedes Central Service Unit." And I said, hi, Maurice, how are you? And he said, I'm great. You know, he said, are you calling to register your SOS unit? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, okay, great. Let me just tell you that, you know, if your airbag is ever deployed, we'll send emergency vehicles to, you know, your location immediately. If your vehicle is ever stolen, call us as quickly as possible because we have a LoJack device on the car, and we can interact with local police force to help, you know, recover the vehicle as fast as possible. And, you know, he went through a couple other different things, and he said, let me just make sure our GPS is functioning appropriately. I have you driving on Hollywood Boulevard right now in Los Angeles, about to turn onto Laurel Canyon Boulevard. And, you know, which is exactly what I was doing. I was literally in the middle of the intersection with my left turn signal on. And I said, where are you right now? And he said, I'm in Muncie, Indiana.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
Are you serious? And he said, yeah. And I said, and you know exactly, and I suddenly realized that, you know, that what makes Eagle Eye a totally unique story and an interesting, compelling story, and something of our, you know, of the day that we live in that couldn't be told, you know, 10 years ago, is the fact that we now live in a digital age where we can be tracked anywhere and everywhere we go. And the idea that, like, you know, we live in a digital world and a wireless world, and if somebody could access the digital, you know, the mass of the digital world, you know, then they could track you wherever you are.
Wow.
Through your cell phone and through, you know, your car and through, you know, you get into your house, you turn on your TV, you know, and that's the beauty of the computer in Eagle Eye, is that it's got the capability of tapping into that, you know, incredibly infinite database of, you know, digital information that can identify anybody anywhere on the planet at any time, you know?
Wow.
And that was when I thought, like, wow, this could be a really interesting movie. So it's a long-winded way to get back to your original question, which is, am I interested in, you know, sort of spy stuff and, you know, action adventure? Absolutely. But I'm not interested in it as a sort of general area, but in a very specific way as it impacts our lives right now. Like Angela's Eyes, which is really came out of, my obsession with liars, you know, and how do you, and, you know, and I read a couple articles on, you know, how surveillance experts read people's behavior, you know, their body language, their facial expressions and their movements and stuff like that, to try to determine who might be telling the truth and who might be telling a lie. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that they had done this research, and they said that, you know, people who are really good at spotting liars are people that are sort of hypersensitive to alterations in everything from tone of voice to facial expressions to body movements and things like that. And it's usually people that have experienced some sort of trauma as a young child, because it sort of heightens their sensibilities and their awareness to unusual behavior and activity around them. And that was when I created the character of Angela as a woman who, was living sort of a typical suburban life. I set it in Rockville, Maryland, which is the town that I grew up in, and where, you know, her mother works for an employment agency, and her father is a computer executive. And she comes home one day to find the FBI and all sorts of authority services raiding her parents' house and arresting her mother and father. And what she comes to realize and discover is that her parents aren't who they say they are. They're actually CIA operatives.
Wow.
And in fact, they've been outed as counter agents who have been spying for hostile governments against the United States.
Wow.
And so for Angela, it caused her to question everything in her life up to that point. She's at that sort of critical age, of adolescence on the onset of adulthood. And suddenly she realized that my parents aren't who they say they are, that, that trip we took to Florida when I was 8 years old was actually not about taking us to Disney World, but about something that mom and dad had to do, where they met with some individual to transfer some information. And so it sort of caused her to kind of reorient her perspective on the world that she developed this incredible antenna for people who are lying to her. And then as she grew up and into adulthood, she sort of in defiance against her parents became an FBI agent and ran a surveillance unit and used all the sort of skills that, that she developed as a child to her benefit, of course, which also wreaks havoc in her personal life, because Little White Lies are the sort of social grease of relationships and work, relationships and ththings like that. So it's constantly causing her problems with boyfriends and friends and, all that sort of stuff.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, so that's how I like to go out. I mean, I love to take a character-based approach into things, the sort of institutions, whether it's spying or, action, adventure, et cetera, that are sort of all around us.
Mm-hmm. So Human Target now seems like it'd be right up your alley, but what was your first encounter with Human Target?
Well, I definitely watched, I probably watched just as a viewer in season 1, I probably watched 3 or 4 of the episodes. And I certainly was intrigued. I loved the size and scope of the show. And I felt like, from a production standpoint, that the show is doing things that very few other shows on television have been able to do ever. And there's certainly no other show on television that was doing, big action adventure in the same way that this show had. So I was very intrigued by it. And so that was my first sort of encounter with it.
And how did you get involved? Tell me about that.
Well, when the show was picked up for a second season, it was definitely on my radar, and it was at a time where I thought to myself, I really would love to, if there's a right show for me out there. I had said to my agents, like, I would be totally open to, staffing on a show, and because I think for a writer, it's a very, very, it's a great skill set to develop, because you have to come into work every day and by 10 a.m. you have to start being creative. You have to start breaking a story or writing a script, or you're doing post, or you're rewriting, or you're doing something, and so it's great for a writer's discipline. So when the show got picked up, I arranged, I was fortunate enough to meet Matt Miller, who's our showrunner, and had a conversation with him, told him what I loved about the show, and heard his plans for, how he wanted to continue to grow and evolve the show in season 2, which I thought were all super smart. And, and it was very quick. It was a week later I was working on the show. So.
Great. Now this podcast will be released on Monday, and the premiere, I think, is it's Tuesday nights?
Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Yeah, the 17th.
Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Yeah. Looking forward to that. Actually, it's one of the only shows I watch with my wife.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I guess that segues a little bit into, tell me about the room, the schedule in Human Target. How is it different than, I guess you haven't been in a lot of rooms, a little bit in Angela's Ashes, but...
Typically, the way certainly a 1-hour drama works is the room, and I'd say most shows have rooms, but not all shows. And it certainly depends upon the particular work ethic and ideology of whoever's running the show. Matt Miller, our showrunner, sees real value in the room, and I think he's right. I think it works. It certainly contributes to a sense of teamwork and and everybody sort of pulling together. But essentially, a day works like this. The room starts up around 10 a.m. So everybody kind of rolls into work around 9:30, quarter to 10. We meet and we discuss at any given time. We'll be working on a specific episode. Like, for example, right now we're breaking episode 14. So we've been working on it for about a week. We decided about a week ago what the specific episode was going to be about. We came up with sort of a one-liner for, this particular episode. It's Winston's nephew shows up, and he's got some minor trouble with a guy who's sort of a bad guy. And Winston and Chance agree to help him out. And when they step into it and try to talk to the guy, they realize it's a much bigger problem than they originally anticipated. And what we're kicking off is this idea of Winston dealing with a nephew who never really looked up to him that much, who doesn't necessarily think he's, as cool as Chance, and what that means to him and how it affects him over the course of the story, and also how they operate, how our team operates a little bit differently when the protectee is somebody that is of great emotional value to one of our leads. Anyway, so we show up when we start. That's the idea. We have been discussing like how to tell that story, where are the emotional points of it, where are the narrative points of it, how do we tell a story that sort of is going to be big and fun and sort of right in the wheelhouse of Human Target, yet also have emotional resonance, so that it becomes about something that something important to our characters that our viewers will sort of understand and value. Mm-hmm. And we always try to deliver an appropriate balance of big action adventure, fun, high drama, and emotional important stakes, and great character moments. So right now we are about, I'd say we're on probably our last day. It's taken us about 7 or 8 days to break. And when we say we break the episode, we break down the episode into each act. There's a teaser and 5 acts in every episode, and we'll go scene by scene. What's the teaser? Teaser scene 1, teaser scene 2. What's the teaser out? And then we'll go through Act 1, Act 2. We're currently just about done with Act 4, and then we'll be breaking Act 5 today. And then when that's done, when we have the whole episode sort of arced out on the board, where you can go scene by scene, you can see what everybody's doing and how it's all working out. Then we transfer it off the board, and whoever's writing that particular episode will begin the outlining process.
Okay.
And that's something that that writer will peel off. That he or she will work either in the office or from home, whatever is the most comfortable place for them. And then the board will be wiped clean, and we will start breaking episode 15.
Mm-hmm. And so do you have to submit an outline to the network, or is it just internal?
No, we definitely have to submit an outline to the network. At a certain point, we usually submit about a 15 or 16-page outline to the network. Yeah. That has every scene laid out, a certain amount of dialogue in it. The idea of an outline is you want to be able to turn in an outline to the network that they can give their notes on, so that when you write this, when you go to script, you're basically you're handing a network a document that doesn't have any surprises in it. Right. Like, they're never going to say at the script, like, oh, I didn't know that at the end of Act 2 was going to be like that. We have to go back and rewrite the whole episode, because they've been a part of the process every step along the way. So because the thing that really hurts a show most is when you get an episode thrown out at the outline or a script stage, because it reflects a lot of work. And typically, as everybody knows, if you're trying to make, whether it's 13 or 18 or 22 episodes a year, you're running at a full sprint trying to keep material in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about, you're still writing features. You've got a number in development. How do you balance that with your work in the room now?
I basically work all the time. I'll get up. I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Like right now, I'm writing a pilot for the Stars Network. Mm-hmm. And I'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'll spend an hour or two on that. I'll come into, to work here. I'll work all day. I'll get home at 7 or 8, and, I'll work on that project as well. I've got a movie that I'm writing, with a director, friend that, we're just about finished on. It's sort of like just work as much as you can whenever you can.
Oh, wow.
And when you're on a show like this, there's not a lot of balance, you know?
Yeah, and you've got a family too?
Yes, I've got a 9.5-year-old son.
Wow.
Yeah, he keeps me busy as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So what advice do you have for somebody who's trying to break into either TV writing or feature writing?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say write as much as you can and never stop, I find that one of the things that I've learned as a professional writer is not to take things personally when people criticize or give me notes on my work, to try to look at all feedback I get as somehow somebody's reacting to something, and I try to at least, even if I decide not to take somebody's notes or, some advice that I get, I certainly try to listen to it and understand where they're coming from, so that my decisions are based on a sort of rational, insightful perspective, as opposed to an emotional reaction. You know, he or she didn't like what I wrote, so therefore then anything they say doesn't matter, you know? And I think that that's one of the things that, as a professional writer, you know, working all the time, like you're always going to get notes. I mean, I can hand, you know, I can hand the script for Citizen Kane to, you know, the barista at my local Starbucks, and he'll tell me why you know, the story, the A story doesn't work, you know, or whatever. And I think so. I feel like on some level, you know, that's the thing that I find a lot of young writers, they write a script and they finish it, and then they basically say, like, that's it. You know, that's the script. And you're like, no, that's the part that's the moment when you know, when you need to really dig in and start working. For me, by the way, I love to rewrite. That's my favorite thing. I mean, I'll write a first draft as fast as I possibly can, just so that I can get to the rewriting process. But anyway, I'd say, you know, my advice to, you know, young writers, just keep writing and keep putting your stuff out there and listen to everything everybody has to say, and, you know, and never stop. I mean, that's the key. It's like, I mean, you know, like everybody in this business has tales they can tell about all the rejection they received along the way before they started getting positive feedback. And there's a lot of it, you know, but the people who ultimately, you know, succeed are the people who just refuse to take, you know, no for an answer.
Yeah. Are there any books or other resources that have been helpful to you or that you would recommend?
You know, I've read probably, you know, 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, you know, books on screenwriting and the business and everything. And I would say this, read them all, but don't become you know, enslaved to the methodology of any of them. You know, I mean, I always have, you know, I've had a number of friends that talk about, you know, Sid Field says this and blah, blah, blah says that. You know, I feel like, you know what, look, for every person that's read one of those books and actually had some success, you know, writing a screenplay based on the principles of that book, there's been other people who have ignored, rejected, and you know, run in exactly the opposite direction and had just as much success. You know, so I mean, the thing about Hollywood is, you know, people who read scripts in this business, they read a lot of scripts. So if it's what they're looking for is an original voice, you know, an original idea with original execution and an original voice. And that's what you have to find more than anything. But I always say to people, I mean, having gone to 2 film schools, I felt like, you know, I heard every principle, you know, there is. But I always say to people, you know, read the books and then forget them. And whatever is sort of left subconsciously will work to your benefit. But there are no formulas to writing a great screenplay.
Cool. Now, before we finish up, IMDb lists a few projects. Charlie Chan's Selling Time. Now, Selling Time was something that you developed a long time ago, and they're still finding a way to make it. But Soylent Green was one that interested me. I've met Harry Harrison before.
Oh, wow.
I really love that author. And so what can you tell me about that project?
I love that script. And I love that project, and I remain hopeful that Warner Brothers is ultimately going to, you know, to put that film into production. You know, it's based on the original movie, and you know, although it's a substantial departure. Like what we did was, and I developed it. David Goyer was my producer on it when I developed it, which was extremely beneficial. But, you know, the essential idea was, because everybody knows the end of that movie, you know, it's so iconic, you know, we decided that we had to sort of be able to move beyond that. And what I became fascinated by is, you know, for those people that, you know, everybody knows the end of the movie is Soylent Green is people, is the question of, you know, why is Soylent Green people? What's happening in the world that this is, you know, things have been reduced to this, that we have the food chain has been completely depleted, and we're relying upon recycled, you know, human nutrition for food. And that's what, so we compressed the original movie into the first 50 pages of this one. And then the second half of the movie, I deal with all the questions and issues of like, what happened? How do we get here? What do we do about it? Et cetera, et cetera. And it's been at Warner Brothers for the script was very positively reviewed, and then there was a number of reasons that it didn't move forward that had nothing to do with the script, but other projects and other filmmakers at the studio that had projects that whether it was Logan's Run or things like that Warner's didn't want to cross pollinate, et cetera. So it's been sort of sitting there, but I keep my fingers crossed that one day they're gonna blow the dust off it and make it.
Yeah, well, it should be a good one.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm really looking forward to Human Target coming out this week, and can't wait to see what's in store.
Thanks, Gray. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide.